Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining Management Cues, Designing Effective Meetings, a Manager's Guide. And we're going to take a unique focus on how to be impactful. So I thank you for joining. We'll give everybody a few seconds to jump in and then we will get started. I'll introduce myself and start there. I'm Dr. Mayra Austin, so I'll be sharing a little bit more about myself, management cues, and then we'll dive into the very hot topic. This has been a very popular webinar, so I hope the tools that we provide and the insights that we share are of application immediately and that you get your time's worth today. So thank you so much for joining. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Just let me know what city and state are you joining us from. Okay, and it looks like we're really close to the top of the hour. We are streaming live via YouTube. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we go. So who is Management Cues? Who's delivering and hosting this webinar? Management Cues is the company that I founded, and it is backed by neuroscience. We've had our programs scientifically tested and our tools as well. And the reason for that was that I wanted to create an organization that was proven to work, that wasn't wasting anybody's time, and that we were actually helping managers experience their role in a different way and really learn, really retain. But at the same time, I wanted to learn more about the experiences that they were having. So that's part of what makes us unique. We also do a lot of performance measurement and tracking. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm Dr. Mayra Austin, and it is my absolute joy and pleasure to be here with you today. So our webinar for today is going to cover these areas. We're going to cover the neuroscience behind meetings and why that's important so that you can get the most out of the interactions with your teams. We're going to talk about the challenges we're having today with meetings because we have workforce shifting, we have AI coming in and other new technology that's disrupting one way or the other. It is helping, it is augmenting, but there are very special things that we should be aware of as managers and leaders. We're going to talk about the framework when we're thinking about meetings so that we can get the most out of it and that we actually are aligned with purpose when we're having meetings, and we're not just in and out of meetings all day feeling lost, frustrated, and like we lost time, right? Because those could be indicators that we're not doing it right. Then we'll go into some action planning, and I'll share some tools and templates that will be emailed to you so that you can actually put them to practice right away. And then we'll close out and open it up for questions. Okay, here we go. Feel free to participate in chat, ask questions, or unmute if you'd like, if you have anything you'd like to share. In addition, your experiences are really valuable. So here we go. So meetings matter because they are one of the primary ways in which we build in culture and in organizations. They help us coordinate action, that's true. They help us make decisions, and they help us build culture, but only when we're doing it right. If we're not doing it right, it does feel like a waste of time. It is frustrating, and we might be having that cycle happen more than we need it to. When we design meetings effectively, it's more than sharing information. So if we as managers ourselves, we feel like we're just having meetings to exchange information, we probably are missing out on an opportunity to be more impactful, especially from a leadership perspective. So let's take a look at that. So one thing that I like to do is know when something is working, what does it look like, right? And so I always like to break down those areas to make it easier for me to reconcile. So why are meetings important? Why should we have them? There are many arguments out there that meetings may not necessarily be productive, but I think that's only when we don't need them. So here's what meetings really do for us. They align people and priorities so that teams move in the same direction. They drive decision making by pooling diverse perspectives, which we need to understand what's going on across an organization. And they pull expertise from different areas, which cannot happen on a one-on-one or just you with yourself and your individual strategies. They strengthen relationships through trust, connection, and collaboration. So meetings, when done right, are a connector in more ways than one. And you'll see that when we go through the neuroscience part of it. They help shape culture by modeling inclusion, accountability, and shared values. So if you're working right now in a very high-paced environment, meetings are the one moment where maybe you slow down a bit. And so that's the connector, right? That's the opportunity to connect if you're maximizing that time together. They also do help boost performance, but only when they're structured around focus, clarity, and outcomes. And so the keywords there are focus, clarity, and outcomes. When those things are connected and intentionally designed in a meeting, then you're going to boost performance. But if they don't do those three things, the opposite is going to happen. Okay, so let's keep digging. So meetings are interesting because I've seen them happen a lot and not necessarily accomplish a lot operationally. And I've seen them be very carefully designed, very intentional, and few and far in between, right? So, what happens when we move from brain drain to brain gain? There's a difference when it comes to meetings. So, when we're operating in kind of that brain drain type of environment, this is happening. Too many meetings, which equals cognitive overload. From a neuroscience perspective, we're not just frustrated, our brain is actually overloaded. There's unclear purpose, which leads to wasted time and frustration. And because we live in this technological world, and often now most of our meetings happen on Zoom, most of the time for many organizations. There's now Zoom fatigue, which is a thing. And there's multitasking that happens during meetings, which means people aren't fully present. So when that is true, there's a reduction in engagement. So if you're multitasking right now as you're listening to this webinar, you're actually contributing to that Zoom fatigue. So I'll take a moment to give you a pause. If you're multitasking, I suggest you pause for this one webinar. Dominant voices drown out diverse perspectives when this is happening, when there's brain drain, and you're not designing meetings for inclusivity and to get the most out of each perspective, right? So when your mind's not in it, to do that, you're not moving towards that objective. So what does it look like when you're doing it right and there's brain gain? Well, when there's brain gain, it's capitalizing on that opportunity. And so what that looks like is there's well-designed meetings that actually boost focus, creativity, and collaboration. And I think if you've ever experienced a meeting that you feel energized after you leave, that's probably a brain gain moment, right? And we could feel it. We're excited. We feel like we got the information we needed. Maybe we got some kudos. Maybe we were celebrated for something we weren't expecting. That's brain gain, right? So there's clear objectives and faster decisions, better outcomes. So when we know what to do, we feel confident to take that next step. That's brain gain. From a neuroscience perspective, it's proven that when we feel these type of brain gain moments, we trust the situation, but we also tend to connect a little bit better. And that releases oxytocin in our brain. So oxytocin, if you've participated on any of our prior webinars, is often referred to as the trust hormone. And the reason it's referred as the trust hormone is because it helps us connect. And so to get there, is a big deal because that means that we're building stronger teams in meetings. So we tend to actually create some activity that allows us to get the most out of a moment or actually lose in the moment. So how the brain processes information in group settings is really interesting. And so meetings is typically a group setting. So there's typically limited attention span. So as managers and leaders, we should kind of be prepared for that. That is what happens naturally to people in meetings. We want to focus on peaks and short bursts and then understand that there could be a decline, right? So we want to be quick, direct, clear. And when it comes to cognitive load, too much information at once leads to overload. So even if we're dealing with a complicated problem or something that might be multifaceted, we need to choose what's most important to highlight. And then there are social dynamics. The brain is wired to seek belonging, safety, and status in groups. And so that social component is happening when we're in meetings. So we need to be aware. There are also mirror neurons. So people pick up on energy, tone, body, and language of others. So when we're intentional, we have to show up in that way when it comes to meetings. And then memory and retention. So you want to use stories, examples, and emotion to help people remember ideas. Storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool in a meeting setup. And then reward versus threat response. Meetings should be very clearly aligned to outcomes. And so we have to keep clarity and inclusion as part of a factor because that actually triggers uncertainty or motivation. And exclusion can also trigger stress. So paying attention to who's in the room, how they're engaging with your meeting is an important aspect of being successful in the meeting space. So what happens when there's cognitive overload and there are too many meetings that are actually causing burnout? So that means that there's constant context switching. So sometimes we're just going back and forth over different things. And so there's an absence of clarity or focus. Information overload could be that there's too much data being pushed or shoved into this meeting time. And there's a lack of recovery time between meetings, which is preventing the brain from resetting. So going from back-to-back meetings is actually counterproductive and it actually impacts your retention, right? So the likelihood of you remembering what was done in a day of, 10 meetings is actually smaller. So it's important for us to know that so that we get the most out of the day, right? Decision fatigue is also something that happens when we're going to all of these meetings and requiring people to make choices or trade-offs. So the stress response then starts kicking in. When workload feels unmanageable, that leads to burnout. So there's this cycle effect happening, which is overloading the brain, and the meeting itself has poor quality. And then you're adding more meetings to that, right? So those are kind of the cycles we get stuck in that impact our ability to think clearly and make really strong decisions. So attention spans, timing, and memory retention, all really important for better outcomes and performance. So here's what I want you to remember. Attention peaks in the first 10 to 18 minutes and then declines sharply, period. And nobody has control over that. That's just the human way. So think about that. How many of your meetings have been more than 18 minutes? Probably most of them. Break information into chunks to reduce overload and boost focus. So practice chunking information versus writing paragraphs or summaries for meeting purposes. And morning hours are the best if what you need from your team is analytical tasks, creativity, starts to peak later in the day. So if you need them to be creative and problem solve, maybe move the meeting to later in the day. The brain also retains information better when it's linked to an emotion or a story. So think about how to frame it, how to link it back to something that they can relate to, or something that happened to you in the past. Those are great ways to get people to actually remember what you're talking about in the meeting setting. Spaced repetition is also very effective. So revisiting key points over time. So maybe at the beginning of the meeting, in the middle, and at the end. That also strengthens memory. So, and lastly, without breaks, retention actually drops. So what we actually do in our environment is we do 5-minute resets to refresh the brain intentionally throughout the meeting, especially if your meeting is going to be 30 minutes or longer. So what are our modern day meeting challenges? And we're going to start getting into how to actually design a meeting in a moment, but we have some different challenges compared to the past. Technology is advancing quickly, and so managers and leaders have a challenge in the workforce to cater to the different audiences, right? Remote workers, on-site workers, new and up and coming professionals who are already in sync with technology and have high expectations. This is all very true. So let's talk about it. So these are our very real meeting challenges today, right now in the workforce. Zoom fatigue and hybrid meeting traps. This could have been an email syndrome. Equity and inclusion meetings, who speaks and who doesn't, right? Are we observant? Are we paying attention to our trends? Do we really understand how to get the most out of every person there? Data, average meeting stats, and productivity losses. These are things that we need to learn to manage because we're spending time there, hence resources and costs to companies, right? So again, maximizing these areas may sound easy, but there's a lot more to them. So excessive time spent in meetings. So these are some real stats from research that's been done. And I found it really interesting because I love to work with middle managers, but I also understand that executive lens, right? And how we decide where we spend money and where we don't. So here we go. Middle managers spend approximately 35% of their hours in meetings. 35%. That's larger than the quarter of the day of their time, right? While senior leaders spend up to 50% of their time in meetings. Yet only 17% of executives consider those meetings actually valuable. And that's from the Journal and Financial Times in 2023. So not too long ago. I'd love to see what those stacks are looking like going into 2026, but really astonishing stats of how much time we actually in the workforce spent in meetings. So there's also a reported lack of preparation and agenda clarity. Only 60% of meeting participants feel that they have time to prepare. Furthermore, just 65% report that meeting minutes are consistently recorded and distributed, and only about 25% still lack access to necessary materials, which hampers effective participation. And that's from IBAB's State of Meeting Management in 2024. So again, this shows how little design and intention goes into meetings. So it's no wonder why we're not getting the most out of it, and so many of us feel frustrated and burnt out. Zoom fatigue and cognitive overload. So virtual meetings, especially video calls, consistently generate more exhaustion than other formats. So we have to know right off the bat that what we do virtually is exhausting. It does take a toll on people. Mental fatigue is driven by nonverbal overload, such as maintaining prolonged eye contact, self-view, and interpreting multiple facial cues. Women report higher levels of virtual meeting fatigue than men. And that's from Shoshan and Wirt in 2022. And this is a research case study. So really interesting how we all respond. Ineffective leadership in virtual settings. Overall, virtual meeting effectiveness averages about 70%, with higher ratings directly linked to perceived strength of virtual meeting leadership. So again, how we conduct ourselves, how we lead, how we facilitate, that is actually directly related to what you're going to get out of it, right? And in terms of performance and output and retention from your team. Okay, so now we're going to get into the beef of today's session, and it's actually giving you a framework for designing and thinking about meetings in a different way. And like I mentioned at the beginning, you'll be getting some templates emailed to you as well to give you a starting point on thinking about meetings in a different way to get the most out of your team's time, but also become more competitive as a manager and a leader. So there are 4 P's to the framework when it comes to effective meetings, and it's purpose, people, process, and product. So purpose is what's the goal of this meeting, and you have to be really clear on these. People, who really needs to be here? And in my experience, the people that need to be there are people that are going to support a specific function or are actually going to have power over a decision that needs to be made. Those are the distinctions I've made in my career to keep meetings lean and keep them actually impactful. Process. What format will drive results? So depending on what you need from that meeting, the format will vary, and you should know which is applicable. And we're going to go over that today. Product. What are we walking away with today, right? What do I want the team to leave with? And it's important to ask yourself that as you're designing the agenda or thinking about what you need to achieve. So I'd like to ask you a question right now. Are all of your agendas structured the same way? If you don't mind, I'd love to hear from you in chat. Just put yes or no. I'm very curious about this question because the response that we've gotten in training and when we're engaging in speaking events is that most managers are in fact writing their agendas the same way for every meeting. That has been the trend so far, but feel free to answer in chat. I'd love to hear from you. So what managers should do. So here's a very fundamental thing that's going to make you, again, stand out and be different. Okay, so it depends on your audience. Thank you. Thank you for participating. Great insight, right? And great approach to meetings. So kudos on that. So what managers should do. So every meeting should be structured around its intended outcome. So here we go. In addition to audience, you have to think about what you're trying to achieve in that meeting, right? To drive that alignment. So here are the different types of meeting objectives. These are the top, I would say the top 6 that should be happening in any workplace. So for example, if you're having a meeting, it should be for one of these reasons, or most commonly for one of these reasons. Decision-making meetings, meaning the outcome of that meeting is to land on a decision. Brainstorming and innovation sessions. That means we need to problem solve. We need to come up with a new idea. Alignment and information sharing meetings. Those meetings should be happening if there's disconnect, if there's confusion, if there's something that needs to be realigned or redirected. Problem solving meetings. There's an actual specific problem that we need to solve for. One-on-one meetings, which are mentoring and coaching meetings, and only the person that needs to be coached should be in it, right? This is not a disciplinary meeting. One-on-one meetings are meant to be a little bit more productive, okay? So celebration and recognition meetings, when it's just about something the team has achieved and a goal a milestone you've conquered, that's what that meeting is about, okay? So these are typical positive type of meetings that are productive if they're correctly aligned that should be happening in the workplace. So let's break these down even further. So let's talk about the decision-making meetings. So the format should be short, focused, with pre-distributed data. And the key elements are that it should be clear. There should be clear decision criteria there. There should be limited participants and a time-boxed agenda. And the neuroscience insight behind this is the brains under time pressure will default to habits. So it's important to prime participants if they're going to make a decision with data before the meeting, right? And so keep this in mind. This is for decision-making meetings. Brainstorming and innovation sessions. So the format here should be interactive and open-ended, often in smaller groups or groups that you can break out. And the key elements are you should have whiteboards, sticky notes, and digital collaboration tools. This is an open-ended, let's think about this openly in a safe environment that's probably has a component of fun in it. And that's if you're looking to come up with these new ideas, right? And enhance creativity. And like mentioned earlier in the webinar, probably at the later part of the day, not a morning. And here's the neuroscience insight. Creativity peaks in relaxed states, so use icebreakers. And yes, frame it to reduce fear of responses. This is a different kind of meeting. It's not a decision-making meeting, so it's structured completely more open, right? You're looking to get a different outcome. Alignment and information sharing meetings. So this would be a town hall style update meeting where you're cascading information. It's about transferring information, a data dump almost. And the key elements is you want to have visuals and Q&A, and you want to have back and forth communication. And the neuroscience insight here is that people remember stories and visuals better than raw data. And you want to link updates to a narrative, right? So you want to connect it to a larger story if you're having this kind of a meeting. Problem solving meetings, which are honestly my favorite kind of meetings, but they should be structured discussions, often cross functional groups, meaning you should have people from different departments typically if you're problem solving. And the key elements here are defining the problem, evaluating options, and assigning action items. And the neuroscience component there is bringing in diverse perspectives so that you can come up with better solutions. So that's where diversity and inclusion plays a role in problem solving, and that has been scientifically proven. And so you have to focus on activating the quieter voices in the room. How do you do that, right? How do you create that psychological safety? In problem solving meetings, it's a requirement that you hear from everybody in the room if you're going to solve at a higher level. So interesting there, the alignment. But one-on-one meetings, so this is typically private conversations. This is that one-on-one. There's the opportunity to build trust in one-on-one meetings. So it should incorporate key elements like coaching, feedback, and career development. The neuroscience insight there is that in one-on-one meetings, oxytocin is released, and that's when people start feeling that trust and relationships start to improve through openness and motivation. So be careful when you use what meeting, because if it's misaligned, you typically won't get the outcome you're looking for. So celebration and recognition meetings. So the format should be light, engaging, and appreciative. So very light, brief even, something fun that doesn't weigh on you. And the key elements are storytelling, using shout outs, and sharing wins. And the neuroscience insight behind this is that recognition actually releases dopamine. So if you use these meetings to motivate or get people excited, then you're doing these meetings probably for 10 to 15 minutes, just to highlight those areas and create that boost. And you're doing it strategically as a leader and a manager for purposes of motivation and retention. So here's our first example, and you are going to get this example template. And this is an example of a meeting agenda that's been designed for alignment and information sharing. And so you can tell the increments there in time and what is covered in each step. That's what makes it aligned with the outcome. So we have the welcome. We have key updates by function or team. We have the strategic alignment section. We close it towards the end with the Q&A, recognition and wins, and then we do next steps and a wrap up, because this is an informational meeting, right? So that's a template that you'll get so that you can align if that's the kind of meeting that you will be participating in. So in the last time we did this webinar, we didn't capitalize on the AI and technology section. So there's really important things that I wanted to share with you all today, because technology is moving fast and it's impacting management and leadership right now in terms of being impactful and getting the outcomes that we need out of the workforce, as well as integration and implementation. So here's some AI meeting do's. This is how you should be using AI as a manager. If you want to remain relevant, if you want to be competitive, if you want to, capture kind of the future of communication, start practicing with some of these. Use AI for note-taking and action tracking. Okay. Do use AI to gather pre-meeting insights, to do some pre-meeting research and alignment. Use AI to enhance inclusivity. I'm going to share with you some prompts that you can actually test on ChatGPT, that it could look at your meeting agenda and tell you if you're being inclusive in how you're delivering that agenda. And keep human-led facilitation. Don't let AI do the facilitating. Make sure you're connecting the dots with storytelling, and that you're observing who's in the room, who's paying attention, who isn't. Those kinds of things are still largely you. That is your largest contribution. And be transparent about how you're using AI. Okay, so very important meeting do's if you want to be impactful in the meeting space. So here are some things you don't want to do. AI, like other technology, in my opinion, is a double-edged sword. And I think that we have a lot of learning to do. In addition to running management cues, I'm also a business professor, and I'm teaching graduate students how to relate to AI and also understand how dangerous it can be. So here are some things you don't want to do. Don't let AI replace human judgment. Don't record or transcribe without permission. Don't use AI as a substitute for empathy. So be very careful in your interactions. Don't automate every interaction. It's the worst thing that you can do in the workforce or with your team. Okay, so don't hand it all over. So here are some little known legal risks of using AI in meetings. And like I mentioned, I teach workshops at the university as well, in addition to the regular courses that I lecture on. But here's something that I have found my students weren't very familiar with, and I have a feeling managers aren't either. So a loss of attorney-client privilege when you use AI, there is a loss of attorney-client privilege. There's consent and wiretapping laws that vary by state. So be familiar with your state regulation around AI and how you use it. There are data storage and sovereignty risks. Anything you put into AI gets shared and gets used to train AI. So if it's anything confidential, if there's anything that could be used, in a court of law, I think that we need to be very careful with it. It has been known and proven to have inaccuracies and misattributions. It's not perfect. There's a lot of bias embedded in AI, and so we have to know how to make that distinction as leaders and managers in the workforce. And there are record retention and legal holds of the information that gets put into AI. So you want to be careful because you're handling information for the employer, right? So vendors can use your data if you're using AI in most cases. And there are regulatory and contractual violations that can take place either with your employer or with AI itself through other jurisdictions. And then last but not least, and this is coming up hot and heavy right now, voice biometric privacy laws. There's a lot going on with profiling right now. There's a lot going on legally and criminally in the courts, and biometrics are coming up as a way to profile and target people, and that's true of workforce as well. So make sure you're in tune with that when you're using AI and don't use it loosely as a manager or leader. So here are some prompts for you as we work our way towards the end of today's webinar. These AI prompts, you can plug them into ChatGPT or any other AI software to help you improve your meetings and be more impactful. But the first one is a pre-meeting clarity prompt. So you can upload your meeting agenda, and you can ask AI to check whether you're actually being clear. And I think that this is a great way to learn. It also shows you where your gaps are in clarity. And this helps eliminate ambiguity and ensures everyone arrives with a shared clarity, right? So you can use it against to bounce off. And then the second prompt is about role and responsibility alignment. I've seen that come up quite a bit in meetings where people aren't sure of why they're there, or we haven't designed it to include the right people for the right reasons there. So this prompt will help you prevent confusion and align the post-meeting follow-up so that people actually know what to execute on after you've met. Number 3 is a really important one, and also I think one of the biggest area of opportunity, both with my students and with the managers that we train, and that's bias and risk. And so this prompt allows you to add quality control into your agenda design so that you're reducing groupthink and emotional bias. And I think the reason why that's so important is because our bias isn't as easily detectable as we might think. Some of it is cognitive and has almost become a reality as a preset. We do it unconsciously unless we're trained to recognize bias. So this can help you become a better, more inclusive manager in that way. And then number 4 is a human impact prompt. And that human impact prompt is really about creating that psychological safety. So it's helping managers design meetings that are intentionally made to keep the humanity of that time together at the center of that meetings, even if you are using AI. So those are my 4 prompts for you, and you're going to get a copy of the deck, so you'll be able to copy and paste and use those for your future meetings to be just that much better. So best practices for managers when it comes to meetings are this. Design meetings with purpose. They're actually time that's allocated for you to use and have an intended outcome around. So if you haven't been thinking about them in that way, it's time to shift and level up into that kind of thinking to be more strategic. And distribute the agenda and materials in at least 24 hours in advance. Keep them short and structured. And by short, I mean 30 minutes or less. That has been my recommendation for years. And then use collaborative tools like Miro, Notion Teams, Google Docs. And if you're not familiar with these, check them out. They're really cool. They increase innovation and interaction, and they're great for live input or follow-up so that you can keep the ball rolling. And then always end with a clear alignment statement. This has been a missed opportunity, in my opinion, with managers. I've attended hundreds of meetings now. Closing out with an alignment. Are we aligned, right? A statement that maybe checks, maybe you go around the room and say, what are you leaving this meeting with? Literally checks for alignment. And then again, number 6, CAT meetings at 30 minutes, time blocks discussions, and use micro breaks if longer. So if you go longer than 30 minutes, I recommend you create and incorporate 5-minute breaks in between every hour, if possible. Okay, that'll help people reset and actually realign and ignite conversations. So with that said, here's the best of the best. Rate, review, refine, and repeat. What gets measured gets improved. Meetings are not an exception to that in management. So add an end survey or feedback loop to your meetings. That's how you're going to create a measurement component to it. And the importance of the follow-up survey is this, right? There's a reason for this. It promotes continuous improvement. It does boost efficiency. It enhances engagement, it supports accountability, and it builds a learning culture where you're learning from your meeting process and you're applying the changes that need to be made to improve things for that specific group. So as we move towards the end of today, here's an example of the effective follow-up survey, and you're going to get this tool. So this will be emailed to you, and it's an example of a standard effective survey that you can use literally after every meeting. But of course, you can design it however you want. These are just areas that are really impactful and really allow you to learn from your team and what they're doing with their time with you. Okay, so make sure that you use it and see what you get in return. So key takeaways for today. Purpose drives design. Attention is limited. That's just true when it comes to meetings. So your real estate in a meeting is sensitive and you need to know what it is. Memory loves emotion and story. Do more storytelling. I promise you, there's higher retention in that. Social safety fuels participation. Check for bias and know how to step into psychological safety. Have AI help you with that. Energy is contagious. Have the mindset that you're going to accomplish something as you're stepping into that meeting, and that make that your purpose during that time with your team. Okay, Q&A. I'll open it up for any questions that you might have. Let me know if you have any questions in chat. I'll take a look for that. Let me see here. Oh, I see some comments here in chat. So in our quarterly town halls, we share business results, next quarter action plan goals, and employee recognition awards. There is a lot of discussion about what we should do first, business topics or employee awards. These meetings usually take about 45 minutes. In your opinion, should we do business topics or first or recognition awards? So business topics first is what I would do. 45 minutes is actually not bad. That's a good time for a town hall type of meeting. So great job on not making it 2 hours. I've seen town hall meetings that run that long. So I would start still with the business topics, but I would make them light and very clear. And then I would do the wins at the end. Great question. Let me know if there are any other questions out there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and step into the close. You're welcome. And feel free to email me if you have any additional questions. Even if you'd like a sample template, I'd be happy to help. So training and support resources. So here at Management Cues, we're all about accessibility. It matters to me to set people up for success. It's something I'm very passionate about and something that I felt was lacking throughout my career, which is why I started Management Cues. So for training and support resources, you'll get a copy of this session recording. You'll get the webinar deck so you can go back and review it slowly. You'll get the meeting and survey template. So you'll get those two examples that you can use right away. And then, of course, online, we have access to training programs that we customize and are pre-designed. We have our management planner featured here, which was one of our first products we designed. And of course, proceeds of our beloved planner are donated to the California Community Foundation for LA wildfire victims. And that has been an ongoing thing for all of 2025. So if you purchase a planner, it goes to a good cause, the proceeds for that. And we have also on our website published our no science studies that we talk about in case you're curious about those. Our consultations are free, so you could schedule time with me directly anytime. And then we have membership management programs too that help everybody at every level have monthly support and training at a really affordable rate. So check those out if you're curious. And we're all over social. So if you're curious about us, check us out on LinkedIn, at YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram or Facebook. And you could just look for at Management Cues. With that said, thank you so very much for joining me today. I can't wait to meet with you again. Have an excellent